Okay, so you want to buy a KFC, slap the red and white logo on a building, fry some chicken, and watch the drive-thru line pay your mortgage every single day. Hundreds of cars rolling through, every one of them handing you cash for something that costs you a fraction of what they're paying. Sounds simple. It is not simple, and the story of how a single fried chicken restaurant actually makes money, and how it actually goes broke, is one of the strangest stories in all of franchising. Before you make a single dollar, you need to survive buying the right to open the thing in the first place. You don't just start selling fried chicken under a name like KFC. You buy a license from the parent company, Yum Brands, and that license alone can run you around $45,000 just for the initial franchise fee. That's before you've poured a single foundation. Once you're approved, the total cost to actually open a restaurant, the building, the kitchen equipment, the signage, the point of sale systems, the parking lot, typically lands somewhere between $1.4 million and $2.9 million, depending on whether you're building new construction or converting an existing building. And that range matters, because a converted gas station on a cheap lot and a brand new freestanding restaurant on a busy corner are two completely different bets wearing the same red bucket logo. Here's the first thing nobody tells you when they picture owning a KFC. You're not just buying a kitchen. You're buying into a system. And that system comes with rules you don't get to negotiate before you're even allowed to sign the franchise agreement. Yum Brands wants to see real liquid capital sitting in your bank account, often somewhere in the range of $750,000 to over $1 million in non-borrowed personal funds, along with a net worth well above that. This isn't a business you can back into with a small loan and a dream. The company is screening for people who can survive a bad 6 months without the restaurant closing, because an empty KFC hurts the brand every driver sees on their way to work. Most people who own a KFC today, by the way, don't own just one. They own it through a structure the industry calls multi-unit or multi-brand franchising. A single operator, sometimes called a franchisee group, will run dozens or even hundreds of locations at once, often across multiple Yum brands like KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut simultaneously. This structure exists for the same reason a landlord prefers 10 small buildings to one big one. Spread the risk of any single unhappy location across a much bigger portfolio, and one bad store in a declining neighborhood becomes a rounding error instead of a catastrophe. That's a very different game than the one facing a single store owner who put their entire net worth into one corner lot in one town. Say you've got your money together, you've been approved, and the store is finally open. Before you collect a real profit, there's a layer of costs that catches almost every new franchisee off guard. First, there's the royalty. You don't just pay for the name once. You pay Yum Brands roughly 5% of your gross sales every single month. Forever, for as long as you operate under that sign, whether the store is having a great month or a terrible one. Second, there's the advertising fund contribution, typically another 4 to 5% of gross sales, pulled together with every other KFC in the country to pay for national commercials and menu launches you have no personal control over. Third, there's the lease. Most franchisees don't own their land outright. They lease it, often on terms set decades ago in some markets, and rent on a well-located fast food corner can run tens of thousands of dollars a month before a single piece of chicken gets fried. You inherit whatever real estate deal was available when you signed, good or bad. Here's where it gets interesting. Because the way a single KFC location actually makes money is far more layered than most people realize. The first and simplest layer is straightforward food sales. The buckets, the tenders, the combos rolling through the register all day. A typical KFC location in the United States does somewhere around $1.20 to $1.50 million in annual sales, though busy locations with strong drive-thru traffic can push meaningfully higher. That number sounds impressive until you realize almost a third of it is already spoken for before you've paid a single employee. The second layer is the part people almost never think about: the drive-thru itself as a piece of economic infrastructure. Industry data has shown that drive-thru sales can account for well over half, sometimes 60 to 70%, of total revenue. At a quick service restaurant like KFC, that single lane isn't just a convenience feature bolted onto the building. For many locations, it is the business, and a store with a poorly designed drive-thru, one that backs up onto the street or forces cars to wait too long, can lose meaningful sales purely from lost patience, no matter how good the chicken is inside. The third layer is delivery, and this one is newer and comes with a catch buried inside it that a lot of new owners don't see coming. Third-party delivery apps route a real and growing slice of orders through the restaurant, but those platforms typically charge the restaurant a commission somewhere between 15 and 30% of the order value. That's an enormous bite out of a business that already runs on thin margins. A $10 delivery order might hand $2 or $3 straight to the app before the franchisee has paid for a single piece of chicken, a box, or the labor to bag it. So far, the store sounds like a machine that prints money from 3 different directions at once: drive-thru, counter, and delivery. Now here's the other side of the ledger, and it is brutal by design. Food and paper costs, meaning the actual chicken, breading, oil, sauces, and packaging, typically eat up around 28 to 32% of total sales. Labor, meaning the cooks, cashiers, and shift managers, typically eats up another 25 to 30%. Add those two together, and you've already lost more than half of every dollar that comes in the door before you've paid rent, royalty, the ad fund, utilities, insurance, or a single cent toward the loan you took out to build the place. This is the part that shocks people who've never run a restaurant. A KFC can be packed, line out the door, drive-thru wrapped around the building, and still be running on a margin thinner than most people would accept from a savings account. There's a detail buried inside the labor cost structure that catches new owners off guard almost every time. Minimum wage increases don't hit a restaurant's expenses gradually. In states and cities that have raised fast food minimum wages sharply, some jurisdictions have pushed hourly minimums for fast food workers, specifically above $20 an hour. A franchisee who built their financial model around one labor cost can watch that number jump overnight because of a single piece of legislation they had no vote on. And unlike rent or royalty, there's no negotiating your way out of a minimum wage law before we get to how KFC locations actually fail. It's worth understanding, something the founder of the entire chicken business figured out decades before drive-thrus or delivery apps ever existed, because it explains almost everything about why the franchise model looks the way it does. Colonel Harlan Sanders didn't get rich frying chicken in one restaurant. He got rich by selling his recipe and his name to other people willing to build the restaurants themselves, taking a small fee per chicken sold in exchange for the right to use his method. That single insight, sell the system, not the store, is the entire commercial logic behind every fast food franchise that came after him, KFC included. The franchisee takes on the building, the staff, the daily grind, and the real financial risk. The parent company collects a steady royalty off the top no matter how any individual location performs. It's a business built to be profitable for the brand, even in the exact years it's brutal for the person running the counter now. Here's the structural risk that runs through this entire business, and it's best explained through something that actually happened across a huge share of the KFC and Pizza Hut franchise system in the United States. NPC International was, for years, the single largest KFC franchisee in the country, operating well over 1,200 KFC and Pizza Hut restaurants at once across dozens of states. In the summer of 2020, NPC International filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company pointed to a combination of rising commodity and labor costs, heavy debt taken on from prior acquisitions, and a pandemic that gutted in restaurant dining traffic overnight. Here's why this mattered so much more than one struggling franchisee. NPC didn't just close a handful of underperforming stores quietly. It ended up closing hundreds of locations across its portfolio as part of the bankruptcy process, and its remaining restaurants were eventually sold off to other operators entirely. A company built on the exact scale advantage that's supposed to protect franchisees, dozens or hundreds of units spreading out risk, ended up proving that scale can just as easily concentrate risk if the underlying debt and cost structure is fragile enough. When commodity prices and labor costs rise across an entire portfolio at once, size doesn't save you. It just means the same problem shows up on more balance sheets simultaneously. To understand how this plays out at the level of a single store rather than a giant portfolio, it helps to think through one ordinary location from opening day onward. A newly built KFC opens on a busy corner with strong traffic counts and a lease that looked reasonable at signing. In the early years, sales climb as the location becomes known in the neighborhood. Drive-thru lines form during lunch and dinner, and the store comfortably covers its royalty, ad fund, rent, and labor costs with room left over. Then, slowly, the pressures compound. A new competitor, another chicken chain or a renovated location nearby, opens and pulls away regular customers. Minimum wage rises in the state, pushing labor costs up several percentage points seemingly overnight. Chicken commodity prices spike due to a supply disruption, squeezing food cost margins that were already thin. Delivery app commissions keep taking their cut on a growing share of orders that used to walk in and pay full price at the counter. None of these individually would sink the store. Together, stacked on top of each other in the same difficult year, they can turn a location that was comfortably profitable into one that's barely breaking even. And a franchisee juggling several locations at once has to decide which stores get the extra investment to survive, and which ones get quietly let go when their lease comes up for renewal. The pressure's on individual KFC locations didn't happen in a vacuum. They happened at the same time the entire quick service restaurant industry was being reshaped by delivery apps and shifting customer habits. For most of the chain's history, a KFC's core product wasn't really the chicken itself. It was convenience located exactly where people already were, on the drive home, near the highway exit, next to the mall. That convenience was the entire reason a family would pull off the road instead of cooking at home. Delivery apps changed that equation. Now convenience can come to the customer's door from a dozen different restaurants at once, chicken included, without anyone getting in a car. That didn't kill the drive-thru business, but it did mean a growing share of every dollar earned now has to be split with a platform that didn't exist a decade earlier, on top of everything already owed to the parent company and the landlord. So, does owning a KFC branch actually work as a business? The honest answer depends heavily on the location, the lease terms, and the year you're asking about, and the gap between a good year and a bad year is enormous even for the exact same building. In the optimistic scenario, you've got a location on a strong corner with heavy drive-thru traffic, a reasonable lease signed years ago before rents climbed, stable food costs, and a local labor market that isn't forcing wages sharply upward. In that case, food sales, drive-thru volume, and a manageable delivery mixed together produce steady, predictable profit every month after royalty, ad fund, rent, and labor are paid. And that's the outcome that's made the largest multi-unit KFC franchisee groups in the country into genuinely large, profitable businesses. In the realistic bad year scenario, chicken prices spike, minimum wage jumps, a competitor opens across the street, and delivery commissions keep eating into a growing share of orders, all in the same 12 months. Royalty and ad fund payments don't shrink just because the year got harder. They're calculated as a fixed percentage of sales no matter what it costs you to actually make those sales. The difference between these two years for the exact same restaurant can be the difference between a location that funds a franchise's next door and one that gets quietly closed when the lease comes up. Exactly the kind of pressure that pushed a company the size of NPC International into bankruptcy court even while operating well over 1,000 locations at once. A KFC looks from the drive-thru line like a simple machine. Order chicken, pay, drive away. From the inside, it's actually a thin, tightly squeezed financial system, where royalty, rent, labor, food cost, and delivery, commissions are all pulling from the exact same pool of revenue. Before the franchisee sees a single dollar of profit, the Colonel didn't sell chicken. He sold a system that gets paid, whether the person running the counter has a good year or a bad one. The building isn't really the business. The margin left over after everyone else gets paid first, that's the business.